Hey there, CS360 students. So in this recording, we have a lot of content to take care of. This recording is going to take care of the implementation details of hooking up an SQLite database in an Android application. Now, I'm going to preface all of this by stating first that we're going to be using SQLite database. You're going to be using it for all, and most likely for your term project. And I want you to keep in mind that the real implementation of an SQLite database within the actual app would be only to save local data. You would need to have some kind of mechanism of transferring that information to a server if you wanted to use this in a more advanced way. So keep in mind this will be a nice way to maintain data locally, but if you wanted to actually, have an app for like Walmart where we are keeping track of all the inventory, a better solution is going to be a REST API that the Android app connects with. That being said, it's still going to be good practice for you to learn about how to manipulate a database and how to use SQLite. So if you go to the class Brightspace page, I have already provided the built template for you, and for the most part it's going to have all of the code in there. There's just a few sections that you will need to implement on your own. And what we want to do is implement details for this study helper app where we can choose a subject, we can then quiz ourselves and move through multiple questions. Right here, it will also have the ability to add, edit, and delete questions. And so we'll also later see on how we can actually pull in questions, say from an API. So again, I already have all of this done. So if you want to do this on your own, that's great. Otherwise, you can just pull in my runnable. The code that I am of particular interest that I want to look at with you is coming down here. So we're going to start out here where we have a class called subject, and then we have a class called question. Very simple. The subjects have a text and the last time it was updated, getters and setters for them. And then the question class has its ID, the text, its answer, and the subject that it represents. In the big scheme of things, I didn't implement this, but really, we've got a subject class. Instead of this being a string, we should probably be using the subject class type, but that's okay. Scrolling down, we have the study database class. And if you watched the SQLite opener, the introduction recording, this is going to extend that class as well. They have hooked this up the way that I would expect it to, where the database name that this is going to use is a constant string. This has a reference to this class as a private static member, and then it provides a get instance method right here. I actually, in my implementation, kind of have it with an initialize method, but that's okay. When we create it, we provide the context, and then you can see that they are newing up the constructor right here, calling the context, and then passing it up to the SQLite Open helper. They have the definitions of what the subject table and question table have. So while these are classes, all these contain are just member variables here that are going to be accessible within this particular class. I probably would create this as an enum, but that's okay. And then methods that we get because we extend SQLite Open Helper. So we have an onCreate method that's going to create the database. So again, I talked about this the last time. It's going to create the table, subject table. It's going to create the question table. The question table is going to use a foreign key reference to the subject table. So it's going to pull in what the actual subject name is when it gets linked. And then they're going to go ahead and add some subjects here. So this is going to have history, math, computing. If you want to add an additional class right here, then you could do that. And then they're going to loop through these this list right here. It's going to create a subject, and then it's going to insert that into the table, the subject table. Again, we saw how this kind of works in the SQLite intro recording. We'll skip down. So to get information out of that database table, we're going to have a get subjects method that's going to return a list of type subject. So we new up the array list, we get our reference to the database, and then we're going to switch on how we want to order our data. So that's going to be a parameter that came in. So do we want to order it alphabetically, update by descending, or we're going to provide a default of just ascending right here. So this is alphabetic, descending, or in an ascending order. We then write the SQL statement. And then again, we saw this last time in the SQLite intro video. To get the information, we perform a raw query against the database, and then we loop through that data using a cursor object. So we get the subject created, we set its text, we set its update time, and we add a subject to it. After this loops, we have our subjects right here as a list. And oh, by the way, always, always, always make sure that you new up your return value. And so it is completely okay to return back an empty list. That would mean there's nothing in the table. All right, we have some CRUD operations here continuing. So we have the ability to add, update, and delete. Again, we went over this in the SQLite intro, so same exact details apply here. We have the ability to get questions. Again, same concept as what the get subjects was. So same exact implementation. We do have the ability to get a question by its ID number. So we come in here, we create a reference to the database. We're going to do a select where the ID equals what was passed in. So we should only get one item back here. So that's why this is an if and not a loop, because we can only get one thing back. Oh, by the way, again, they did initialize it, but in this case, they initialized this return object to null. This is very common. So when you do a get question call, if you get null back, that means you provided an invalid question ID. So out on the UI side, we would check for null, and then we would put up a message saying, we have a null, there's no question with that ID. They then have the add, update, and delete methods. Again, very similar. We've already seen that work before. Okay, so again, they already have all the details hooked up for us. I'm just going to jump into Android Studio here, and let me make sure that I got my emulator, that I've got it up and running. I don't think it's hooked up yet, so let me get my device manager going. So let me get that running. And then again, we have over in the project, I've already got the files already created. So here is the study database, and it has everything already implemented in it. So again, very similar, has the same code that we already saw. Oh, by the way, we can go ahead and start this application up. So let's run it. Because when this does start up, it is going to create our tables. And then we should have in the tables history, math, and computing without any questions in them yet. So let's get this up and running. I'll be back when it is built, and then we'll take a look at that. Okay, so as you can see, here is the app up and running. Again, we have our default values, history, math, and computing. Right there they are. And again, there's nothing that they have in them. So if I click math, and I should be able to, there we go. So we don't have any questions. We'll take care of that in the next part here. But I do want to show you, so if I go back here, I do want to show you if we go to the device file manager. So again, I showed you in a previous recording, view, tool windows, device file explorer. We can actually find that database that got created. So I'm going to go to the data directory, data, and I'm going to go to com.zyBooks, study help. There it is. Here's the study helper, and here's the database right here. It is. So unfortunately, to use my DB browser, I can't I don't know how to exactly navigate through this to get to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. Oh, sorry, I'm going to save as. I'm going to put it on my desktop. And so, again, I showed you in the previous recording, you can use this DB browser for SQLite, and I can open up that database that I just saved to the database, to my desktop. And so database structure, I have my questions table, I have my subjects table, and again, there are nothing in them at this time. So it got created with the ID, text, answer, and subject, and that's kind of showing up kind of funky. There we go. And subjects, there they are. So we've got the history, math, computing. Oh, by the way, if we really wanted to add another class to this, so we'll add our class. I'm just going to copy this timestamp and I'm going to paste that in here and I'm going to write changes to the database. Let's go back to the Android Studio running. Oops, I forgot. That didn't get saved. So I saved it here on my desktop. And so what I need to do in here is I'm going to right click, upload, and I'm going to go to my desktop. Where's my desktop? Not app data, desktop. There you are. And I'm going to upload the updated study database right there. Okay, so that's been updated. And I don't think that's going to dynamically update. Let's see if it does. It probably, once it created the reference. So once it started up, oh, nope, it did automatically update. So there you go. I've got the updated value in our table there. All right, so next thing to look at is in section 6, they actually walk us through how to add, edit, and delete questions. So I'm going to go to the pertinent code. So they're going to create a question edit activity. So we'll add an activity where we will have a text field for the question text, the answer text. It's going to have a reference to the database, a reference to the ID, and then it's going to have the reference to the actual question. On create, this is going to do all of the work of creating the UI. What is of interest right here is we're going to pass the subject to this activity, which makes sense because we're creating a question. So the subject has to get passed in as data. So we've got the subject here, and then it's going to have a button that when it gets clicked, we're going to get the text out of the text fields, set them to our question. So it's got the text and it's going to have the answer. And then we're going to either add the question or update the question. So M question ID, that came in right here also as part of the intent. So if it is coming in as a -1, it's a brand new question. Otherwise, we had selected a question that already exists, and so we're going to update it. So keep in mind, we saw earlier that we have that database manager that we're just calling its add question method, its update question method. I do believe that the update question method, that gives us information back, right? So let me find update question in here. Unfortunately, this does not give us any details. So DB update, where this returns, this should probably return a Boolean, I'm going to guess. We're not providing any details on whether or not this actually did update. We probably should have done that here, so that way, if it comes back as a false, we can then display an error message. But then you can see they're going to put it as an intent, and it's going to get sent back to the resulting code. Again, I'm not interested in any of the layout stuff. Here's the question activity, and then it's going to handle the on activity result here. And it's going to check the result code. And if it's all good, we're going to display an update. Otherwise, if, let's see here. Oh, this is for if it's a new one. This is going to be if it's for an update. They also implement the delete question in there. So we can see that we have the question ID. We're going to get it from the list that we currently have. And then we're going to call the delete question method, providing it the question ID. That's then going to remove it from the local list that's been cached off. And again, if we don't have anything in there, we're going to not do it. Otherwise, we're going to show the question. Oh, by the way, they do also add in here a way to display messages rather than using the toast. So this is called the snack bar, shows up down here at the bottom, and they provide us all of the XML code for that you need to update, as well as how to implement displaying messages to that. So before, this was displaying the toast method, the one line of code for a toast. This has now been changed to the snack bar. So one thing that I don't really like about this is the user has to make sure they see this with a toast. It actually pops up at them so they can see that for sure. Here, they have to note it's down there at the bottom. And then also you might need to adjust how long it stays visible, because it does provide the opportunity to do an undo, which is what this handles right here. So if they deleted something and wanted to undo it and they don't click down there quick enough, you might want to try to extend using different length of time there. Okay, so again, you can come into the Android Studio app and you have a running version right now that lets us add questions, update, and delete. So let's take a look at, make sure that all works. And I can just go find it. I can just drag up, and it is the study helper right here. And so let's go add a question. So what is 2 plus 2? And the next is the answer is 4. And so I'll click the checkbox, click the check, and the question was added. So now if I go back out, if I go into math, all right, we've got our question in there. We can do our show answer. We can edit that question. So we'll change it to be 4 and we'll make it incorrect to be 5, or we'll just make this be a 3. So we'll save all of that off. And so now our question is updated, and we decide that we don't like that question. So then you can see we delete it. And again, I could click undo and I get it back. Or if I delete it, once this goes, I now have no recourse to get that back. Okay, so that's going to do it for this part of the chapter.